Well, Hurricane Milton is explosively intensifying into a Category 5 overnight. And is that something we should be alarmed about? The fact that it has intensified so quickly. They say it's called rapid intensification. I want to make sure you can hear me out there. We're always live here at Makayo Messenger, but just getting a sign that you might not be hearing me. So just want to make sure sound is coming through and video is coming through for you. But Hurricane Milton has surged overnight in what they call rapid intensification. Now, they figure if they just name it something, that may make you accept it better. But is it mysterious that it happened so quickly and so rapidly? That's the question. So is it anything to question the fact that we've been having these kind of unusual hurricanes, things that we can't explain? And appreciate the thumbs up. Okay, you can hear me okay. You can see things okay. That's good to hear. And is it any wonder that this strange hurricane just happened to form in the Gulf of Mexico, if I'm not mistaken? Maybe it did come in from somewhere else, but from what I'm understanding, it's just sort of originating there, which is kind of odd in and of itself. But then the fact that it's headed toward the state that houses the duly elected Perez, in addition to many constituents, conservatives, Christians, people they might want to eliminate before an election coming up here in less than a month. Kind of makes you wonder, is this all just happenstance? Is this just accidental, coincidental, if you will? Well, when you put it in light of what's been happening lately, you kind of wonder, when you get a hurricane that goes in the mountains of North Carolina, sounds like an oxymoron, right? Hurricane in the mountains of North Carolina. What? And it's just sort of miraculously or maybe mysteriously destroying streets, unexplainably. So people are abandoned and cannot be reached. And it just happens to be happening in a town that is over $1 billion lithium mine. Just coincidental, of course, right? There could be no connection to any nefarious plot here to try to take that land from those people, right? Then they're saying there's some strange blue balls they're finding in the wreckage. Could these have anything to do with additional destruction that's happening? Well, you can't help but be reminded of Maui and what took place there recently in our recent memories and how many things happen. It's so hard to keep track of all these things. But if you remember, in Maui, there was a fire, and it destroyed a lot of the precious, capital, precious land and houses of the villagers. But from a real estate eye, it was a lot of prime real estate that happened to get destroyed, so that perhaps people could come out and buy it out from under them at a cheaper price. What's interesting about that occurrence is that there were cars that seemed to be melted into the ground, and yet trees were still standing. There was a lot of a question as to how did this come about? Were there things coming down from the heavens that were causing this? Perhaps not from God, not an act of God, but an act of mankind. And so it's causing people to question, are these things real? Are they natural? Are they from God, or are they man-made? You even have members of Congress who are asking this question as well. So before I continue, if you would hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, and please share these videos and share this channel. We are suppressed as a channel, and odds are you'll never find us out there. So if you happen to find this channel, boy, it's a special gem. And if you could share it with other people, because odds are this network will not. So also, we want to thank you if you have helped to support this channel in the past. If you can continue to do that with your prayers and support, we are very grateful for that. You can find links in the description for more information on that. But, I'm reminded of The Truman Show, and you probably remember this movie, The Truman Show. And in that show, there was a man born in a dome-shaped environment, similar to what the Bible describes that we live in, with the firmament over us and kind of a flat earth below. And he was born in this Hollywood depiction, but often we know in Hollywood they're actually they're really trying to show you things that are really going on. They're kind of telling you things without telling you, so to speak. And he's born here not knowing that he's in this enclosure, this dome, if you will, and he's raised in that environment. Well, the climax of that movie, and if you haven't seen it, well, I don't know that I'm ruining too much for you here because there's more to it than just what I'm going to share. But basically, there's a storm that occurs, and obviously, it's not a real storm, created by God. It's a man-made storm because he's in a man-made environment, and there's a man playing God that I just showed you, played by Ed Harris there, and he basically is, directing this thing as it's going because it's a live show, and he creates this storm to try to keep the character from exploring his boundaries and going outside of his limits. And so he creates this storm that is inexplicable. It's got all kinds of lightning and things happening in it that wouldn't happen naturally. And it makes you kind of wonder about some of the things that happen in our environments that aren't natural. We probably are all familiar with these lines in the sky, often called chem of the trails. And so obviously these are being man-made, right? These aren't natural formations of clouds, but they do often dissipate and turn into clouds. And this is what is connected with what's known as weather of the modification. Now, what's funny is they'll try to deny this, yet it's public knowledge that it's done, right? I mean, you see it in the skies. Here, you've got articles about scientists flying planes into clouds to make it snow more, so they're doing things that supposedly block the sun or try to encourage rain or encourage snow. So it's common knowledge that it happens, but on one side they'll acknowledge it, and on the other side they'll say, oh no, it's not happening. So weather modification here, and this is something that's been going on for quite a long time, actually, as early even as 1901. Here is what we know as hail cannons, and these are actually cannons that could shoot hail into the air. Now imagine if you were to shoot these into enemy territory, it would be very easy to deny that you had anything to do with it, right? You could simply say it's quote unquote an act of God. And we know that the people who are trying to take over the world want to be God. So it makes sense that they want to control the weather. Well, this is back in 1901. They're shooting hail out of cannons. And so the hail lands on your house, damages your house. You say, oh no, that was just a natural occurrence. It had nothing to do with us. We didn't do anything. So you can start to see how managing the weather could be a very practical application for someone who wants to do nefarious things without being known. I'm reminded of the scriptures that talk about hail. It says in Revelation 8, it says, the first trumpet sounded, and there followed hail and fire mixed with blood, and they were thrown to the earth. The third of the earth was burnt up, and 1/3 of the trees were burnt up, and all green grass was burnt up. And I find that very strange because, when God brought about destruction often for people in the Bible, he didn't always bring it about by his own hand. In fact, he would often use other armies, other nations. Nebuchadnezzar, for example, was used to come and take the Jews away to captivity, and that was all part of God's plan for that to happen. So sometimes you think, well, some of these things happening in the Bible, maybe a combination of God and maybe a combination of man doing some things. For example, these hurricanes that are happening, are they God-made? Are they man-made? Well, that's what we're exploring here a little bit today. And so when you think of these times in the Bible when hail is falling with blood and fire, it sounds strange. It's like, well, maybe this isn't even from God directly. He may be initiating with the trumpet and so forth, and it may be coming down out of the heavens, so to speak, but we don't really know where it initiates from, right? And some of these things seem to be fulfilling some of that, or maybe fulfilling some of that. For example, the Euphrates River drying up, as we were all talked about a year or two ago. We were all focused on that, and there were a lot of man-made things that contributed to that, but God is allowing it to happen. So it's something to consider. Here in Revelation 16:21, it says, "And great hailstones about 100 pounds each fell from heaven on people, and they cursed God for the plague of the hail because the plague was so severe." But maybe God wasn't to blame, so to speak. maybe he's allowing mankind to destroy each other. We know, the first 4 seals, there's a lot of destruction that goes on that happens. The seal is broken and things happen, but may or may not be directly from God. You think about these hail cannons. They may have developed these hail cannons quite sufficiently and efficiently by now to deliver 100-pound hailstones. Something to consider. So weather has been something that has been part of WAR fare for some time, and it's been something that always plays a role in battle. Back in the second WAR, they had a weather forecast that saved the day. They were going to go in on D-Day, and they had bad weather, so they had to change the timing of that. It was June 6th, I think, originally, or some. Yeah, this is June 6th. And because of the weather forecast, they changed their plans. Here's an actual copy of the original weather forecast from that time. And so this is in the 40s, of course, late 30s, early 40s. And so following that, they began to try to control the weather. And it became a cold WAR weapon that they could use, against the Soviets at that time, America and the Soviet Union. And here's an original, poster from that, Weather Made to Order, and talking about man's progress in weather control. So this is in the 50s, okay? So progress in weather control. In other words, they've been doing it since the early 1900s, and they're just making some progress here. So this is not really news. It's just something that they continue to do. But this then leads to something a little bit more serious than simply modifying the weather, and that is using the weather to actually bring about destruction. Kind of like I mentioned with those hailstones. Now, they didn't say they were claiming to do that, but they did actually start publicly doing that in the 70s, specifically with Operation Popeye in the Ho Chi Minh Trail, where they started seeding the clouds so that they could increase the storms and help the storm monsoon season to continue so that they could keep the WAR going. And this is Operation Popeye here. Now, this is something that is known. There's a record of it here. So that brought into question, is the military now going to use weather as a weapon, right? Obviously, it's something that they started to do there. And, again, they had hailstone guns from 1901. So what else do they have? What else can they control? What else are they capable of doing? Well, in 1977, following Vietnam, they actually they banned weather WAR fare in 1977, at least publicly, right? According to the UN, and we all know we can trust the UN, right? They're only trying to take over the world and take away all of our sovereignty and our independence. So, of course, we can trust such a wonderful organization. But they supposedly, at least publicly, they banned it. But that's often what they do when they want to go underground with things, when they don't want people to know about it anymore. They say, oh, yeah, well, we used to do that, but we don't do that anymore, right? So it goes top secret, or it goes underground, right? And so, obviously, if they have a tool, they're going to want to try to use it. But the beautiful thing, as I said, about weather WAR fare is that you have plausible deniability. So and what does that mean? It's the ability to deny the knowledge or responsibility for anything that occurs, right? So if a hurricane comes and knocks your house down, who are you gonna blame for that, right? You say, oh, it was an act of God, right? That's what they put in your insurance plan, or whatever documents, right? That's what they call it. But in reality, it may have actually been brought about by a nefarious force of some kind, someone who didn't want you to exist anymore, someone who wants to wipe you out. It's something that could be used against an enemy, but they don't have a way to blame you directly, so you have plausible deniability so that they can't really retaliate. They can't say, well, you caused that storm, right? And so at least when they claim, oh, well, we don't use that, right? We banned that back in the 70s. And of course, we would never use something we banned, it's not like we're secretly doing it or anything like that. But here we have this document from 1996, August of 96, if you can read this here. And this is predicting weather as a force multiplier owning the weather in 2025. 2025. Well, that's just around the corner, isn't it? And this is actually sent to the Air Force. It was a research paper presented to the Air Force for 2025, but it says here August 1996. Now, in this article, some interesting things. I just want to point out a couple diagrams here, and you can obviously find this online and read it for yourself if you'd like to. But further down here, okay, so what we see here is they use intense microwave beams right here to change the ionosphere, and affect the weather. They can affect storms. Now, you might think, man, how can you control all the weather? That seems like quite an insurmountable task. How are you going to control the whole weather of a planet? Well, you don't have to. You don't have to control the whole planet. You can just control one area, like one area in the Gulf, for example. In the case of a hurricane, it needs low air pressure, and it needs low barometric pressure, and it needs warm waters. So if they can do things to charge the ionosphere and create, as you see down here, an artificial ionosphere, right? They can change the level of the ionosphere the way they want it to be. And if they can charge the water underneath it, maybe with a submarine or something to warm it up and heat it up. I mean, they have underwater NUKEs and different things they can perhaps use, or different tools perhaps they can use to create the warmth that they need. And not that they would use an NUKE, but the fact that they have those means they probably have other things they could use underwater to do that, and basically create the artificial conditions necessary to have a hurricane, to create a hurricane, and to stoke that hurricane overnight to a Category 5 as we have upon us right now. So kind of an interesting article. Well, the next year, they come out with, this is 97, they come out with, for the Air Force as well, a benign weather modification. So basically, in one sense, they say, oh, we could do this. In another sense, they say, oh, well, we're not really going to do anything serious. We're not going to create hurricanes or anything like that. We would just, we could just modify it for the good of the people, of course. We'd never use it for a destructive purpose. It would only be for people's benefit. Well, here, China is saying they plan to be able to modify weather over half of its territory by 2025. Says it right there, that they already plan to do that. And when you think about all this talk about global of the warm of the ing and climate of the change, is it really changing, or are they doing it so that they can bring about the change that they want? You see, that's really the change that we're talking about. So let's talk here for a moment about hurricanes before we wrap this up. So hurricanes says, fear of hurricanes by human beings has a long history. Ancient Caribbeans called them huracan, a god of evil, and the Mayans refer to them as Huracan, a creator god who brought a massive deluge. There is no doubt that hurricanes have been one of the most powerful and destructive forces on Earth for ages. So, hurricanes can release energy, the energy of 10,000 NUKEs. Let me say that again. One hurricane can release the energy of 10,000 NUKEs. Now, don't you think that would be a power that a nefarious force, or they may not think they're nefarious, but a force of any kind would want to control? I mean, don't you think that's something that an energy force that they would want to harness and use? Of course it is. Of course it is. I mean, it's better than NUKEs because, again, you can't trace it to anybody. If you can control it like a remote control vehicle, and you get this weather thing going, and then you can push it in the direction you want it to go, and it goes and brings about the destruction you want to bring, and you can wash your hands of it as if you had nothing to do with it. That's perfect. It leaves no evidence behind. It's like, the perfect crime, so to speak. There's no evidence. You can't prove who did it. You can't trace it back to anybody. It was just a natural act. Oh, that's so unfortunate. I guess we'll have to come in and steal your land now. That's so unfortunate. I guess we'll have to come in and take over your country. Oh, that's so unfortunate. I guess you won't be able to vote in the upcoming election because everything's been decimated. And boy, Florida just happens to be a swing state. And oh, wow, that's just too bad. Oh, and so many constituents there really want to bring about a change in the world for the better. And isn't it too bad that those people were destroyed by a Category 5 hurricane? So is it possible? Well, it's public knowledge from 2016 at least that labs can create Category 5 hurricanes. So we always know that the top secret stuff's probably about 50 to 100 years maybe ahead of us, right? And what we find out about. I mean, how long did they have the internet before it came out? How long have they had touch screens? How long have they had a lot of things? So if they're letting you know that they can create Category 5 hurricanes in a laboratory, then that means they've probably been creating them a lot longer before that, secretly. And, for them to be able to do it, if they can do it in a lab, they can do it on a grand scale. All you need is more money, right, to put behind it, and you can do it. So they figured out how to create Category 5 hurricanes. Now I was going to go over that with you. There are links on here that I won't show you now, but online that you can find out how to make a hurricane. It's almost like finding the formula to a BOMB, right? You wouldn't put that online, but they have the formula for how to make a hurricane online. So if you want to make it, they actually teach you that. They even have websites where you can kind of put it together and put together all the components. So if a child can do that on a simple website, then certainly a government with billions of dollars can create as big a hurricane as they want. It kind of goes along with the artificial sun that China has been producing. So, there's lots of scriptures come to mind. Of course, in end times, Luke 21, Jesus says there will be signs in the sun and the moon and the signs on the earth, distress of nations with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring. Now, you say, well, that's sea and waves roaring. Does that have to do with hurricanes? Well, I thought it was kind of interesting here because obviously a hurricane only starts over the sea, and only involves waves and, water, the water of the sea. So you can't have a hurricane without the sea. But what's interesting here is that the word thalassa means sea, kai and then the waves, salos. But what's interesting is it says the tossing of the waves specifically, or the swell of the sea. So what's interesting here too is this last word, acheo, like echo, this roaring, it actually is the sound of the sea. And let's see if I have it open here. Here it says to make a sound, to give forth a sound when struck. So I was just thinking of like the howling of the winds of a hurricane, right? The sound that goes along with a hurricane, because the sea does make its share of sounds. I mean, waves crash and so forth, but there is something to that sound, that haunting sound. And I thought it was interesting, the word here that they use for perplexity, because that actually means they're questioning it. It's this word aporia, and it actually means to question. And so they're questioning, like, what's happening here? Like, in other words, it seems that strange things are happening, not normal things unusual occurrences, not normal sea and waves that they deal with all the time, normal storms, but something out of the ordinary, something unusual that they're perplexed. They're questioning it. Why is it happening like this? Well, I've got some good news for you, and that is that Jesus calms the storm. Amen. In Matthew and the Gospels, it talks about Jesus calming the storm and speaking to the storm and telling it to be quiet, be still, and that they were so amazed that who is this that even the wind and the waves obey him, right? They're just amazed that he could calm the storm. So, the world may try, nefarious forces may try to be like God, and they may try to control the storms, but in the end of the day, God is the one who controls that storm. God is the one who says where it goes and where it doesn't go. And, the great thing about water is, we are made of water, and, in large part, and that living waters are what God offers us for salvation. He says, let anyone who is thirsty come to me and drink. Whoever believes in me, as Scripture has said, rivers of living water will flow from within him. So